Hello, and welcome back to Sacrifice of Praise, your encouragement channel. Today we are reading chapter 13 of Sacrifice of Praise, and this chapter is entitled Envy. Proverbs 27:4. Wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? One of the greatest temptations in the valley is envy. We see the ease and blessing of others in light of our own troubles, and Satan uses envy to distract and keep us from victory. The most obvious example of envy I can think of in Scripture is Rachel and Leah. Laban and Jacob made a mess of the lives of these two sisters. Jacob loved Rachel dearly enough to work 7 years for her, but Laban tricked Jacob and gave him Leah instead. When Jacob realized Laban had duped him, he bargained to marry Rachel and work 7 years for her too. Being a plural wife would be hard enough, but to put sisters in the position of vying for their husband's attention and affection was terrible, and it bred envy and resentment. Rachel is the favorite wife, but Leah had children. Leah envies Rachel because Jacob loves her, and Rachel envies Leah because she has children. What an unsettled and unhappy family, everyone vying for love, favor, and satisfaction. Each one felt justified in their desire to be loved or to have a child. And we see the fruit of that envy and strife in their children years later. It is easy to excuse envy as normal longings or a desire for God's blessing. But we don't do ourselves any favors when we allow envy to infiltrate our lives. Rachel and Leah could have helped each other through their heartache, building a loving and stable home for the children. Instead, they allowed envy to drive a wedge between them. Somewhere in the middle of our 6 miscarriages, I let the insidious sin of envy take up residence in my heart. It crept in so slowly and quietly that I didn't realize it was there for too long. I excused it as an honest longing for my children, but it became more than that. Each time I would see a pregnancy or birth announcement, I felt that stab in my heart. I rejoiced for friends and family, but why couldn't I have the same blessing? Why would God withhold the same joy from me? As my health failed, envy showed up in other areas. When I saw older people working and doing more than I could, I wondered why God would let me continually suffer from weakness and debilitating pain. If I were healthy, I would serve Him more. It was easy to put a spiritual face on the desire, but truthfully, I was envious of the health and families God gave others. As I read Proverb 27:4, the last part caught my attention. We hear teaching on anger and wrath, and we know how destructive anger can be. What about the last part of that verse? But who is able to stand before envy? We don't deny the first part of the verse because we know it's true. However, we often skip the last portion. After all, doesn't envy only affect me? It doesn't hurt anyone else. I know it's wrong, but I'm working on it, becomes our excuse. I don't know if the question in this verse, who is able to stand before envy, is about the envious person or the envied person, but I know both suffer when envy is present. When we allow it into our hearts, we are not at peace. Our focus is not on God. Our hearts are in turmoil, and we are discontented. When we envy another, we cannot build or keep a genuine godly relationship with them because envy is impossible to hide. It comes out in our eyes, tight smiles, murmured comments, cutting humor, silence, and so many other ways. To diagnose envy in our hearts, we need to be sure we know what it is. Webster defines envy as 1. Pain, unease, mortification, or discontent excited by the sight of another's superiority or success, accompanied with some degree of hatred or malignity, and often or usually with a desire or an effort to depreciate the person and with pleasure in seeing him depressed. Envy springs from pride, ambition, or love mortified that another has obtained what one has a strong desire to possess. 2. A feeling of discontent or resentful longing aroused by someone else's positions or possessions, qualities, or luck. The first definition I might skip and say, that's not me. There's no hatred or malignity in my feelings. I don't want to see them depressed. However, the second definition hit home. I've been there. How thankful I am for God's deliverance from envy and his strength to guard against letting it back in. Who is more miserable than an envious person? Proverbs 14:30, a sound heart is the life of the flesh, but envy is rottenness of the bones. That is the best description I've ever heard of envy and what it does to a person. It rots. And we all know that rot weakens and contaminates everything good around it. If you don't think this is true, put one rotten apple in with some good ones and see what happens to the surrounding fruit. Or let rotten boards stay in your floor. Eventually, as the rot spreads, they will weaken and you will fall through. It is not enough to diagnose the problem. We must also deal with it. When God finally got through my stubbornness and showed me that what had started as grief had become envy, it broke me. The nastiness of it sickened me. I confessed my sin and asked God to help me root it out. Each time I felt that pang of envy at another's blessing, it reminded me to thank God for his goodness and surrender my will to his again. I wish these lessons were one and done, like learning 2 + 2 = 4. You understand it and you move on to something else. I find I am tested repeatedly on the spiritual lessons I learn. I had to die daily, sometimes hourly, in this area. It was hard, but worth it. I cannot describe the blessing of living in joy and peace instead of envy and bitterness. One reason I found this lesson so difficult is my desire for fairness. I had a distinct idea of what I thought was fair or unfair from the time I was a small child. Regardless of how many times my parents, usually my dad, reminded me that life isn't fair, I would mutter under my breath, well, it should be. It's just not right. It didn't matter if it was me or another who was facing the unfair circumstances. My childish mind struggled to understand how unfair circumstances could be right. Through the trials God allowed, I realized God was using life's unfairness to mold me and make me into the person he wanted me to be. I started learning how to surrender the illusion of control and accept what God allowed as best for me. I learned to ask him what he wanted to teach me and how he wanted to change me through it, instead of asking, why me? Or why not me? Having suffered the rotting effects of envy, I don't want anyone else to endure that. Along with the definition of envy, let's look at some symptoms that help determine if we harbor envy in our hearts. Discontent or resentment at someone else's blessings. Do you struggle with the accomplishments and blessings of others, even when blended with happiness for them, like I did? Unhealthy competition. Do you always need to be right, first, or best? It's good to work on being the best you can be, but the need to always be first or the best is a red flag that you struggle with envy and pride. A need for recognition. Do you get angry, frustrated, hurt, or sad when you don't get recognition for what you contribute to your family, work, church, school, or any other area of your life? Envy or pride are at the root of this. Obsession with social media. I see this often. It is easy to forget that social media only shows us carefully chosen slices of someone's life, and that can lead to envy. Do you obsessively scroll through social media only to leave it feeling less joyful than you started? Comparison is the thief of joy. Constantly comparing yourself to others can be a sign of envy. Negativity and gossip. If you most often focus on the negative, it could be because of envy. We should see and share God's blessings, not focus on the negative. When I was filled with envy, I always saw the negative. Remember, what we see as negative may be God positively working in our lives. Bitterness or resentment. These can stem from envy. If you are harboring envy, it can cause bitterness or resentment. If either of these are present, look for envy too. Envy is the opposite of contentment. One thing that helped me was to remember that my life was in the Lord's hands. If I need something, God promised to provide it. That means if He hasn't provided it, I don't need it. Realizing this helped me trust the only wise God to give me what I needed and rest in His plan for me. As I trusted Him and focused on His power and goodness, I traded the rottenness of envy for the peace and joy of trusting Him. The battle isn't easy, but it's always worth it. If you are struggling with envy today, it may feel like an impossible task to dig it out and get rid of it. It may feel like that you have a right to envy, that you deserve it because of what life has given you. But both of these are based on feelings. And we know that feelings lie. And our feelings are determined by our thoughts. So if you are feeling envious, your focus is on something other than God and His blessings and His plan for you. So I want to encourage you, digging out the envy in our lives is hard. And you may get discouraged and say it's too much, it's too hard, but it's worth it. Stick with it. If you've started this journey of getting rid of the envy and cultivating contentment in your life, and you've gotten weary of it, don't go back to it. I promise you, it is worth the effort to get rid of the envy. There is no peace, no joy, no contentment when we harbor envy in our lives. So I hope today helps you and encourages you to get rid of the envy in your life so you can offer God a sacrifice of praise.